Hi everyone, and welcome to BFI Feature Film Festival 2025. I'm Ella Townsend and I'm the Young Talent Coordinator at Film Hub Midlands. I manage and oversee the BFI Film Academy for the Midlands region. Today's session is titled Below the Line Crew, focusing on the vital roles of Locations Assistant and Gaffer, featuring our brilliant BFI speakers here today. BFI Film Academy alumni speakers here today. So this session discloses the essential behind the scenes roles that bring productions to life. This session dives into the world of locations and gaffer, two key positions, and immersing the audience into the world of film, the world of screen seamlessly. So Liv and Ed will share insights on responsibilities, career paths, and on-set problem solving. So whether you're an aspiring filmmaker or curious about crew roles, this is your chance to learn from Ed and Liv. So yeah, thank you both so much for joining and taking part in this. I really appreciate it.
Of
Um,
course.
we've got quite a lot to get through. So I was wondering if you're both able to share where you started, because I obviously met you through Broadway's BFI Film Academy based in Nottingham. So I was just wondering if you're able to share some insight of um, your film academy experience and, what it was like for you in terms of like early education from school and college.
Yeah, sure. So through school and like college, I never really had that much experience in I didn't have the equipment or the experience to kind of produce films or experiment with making much at all. So then we're going to the BFI Academy, managed to work in an environment of people who were all there with the same purpose to make films and to collaborate. And it was a really nice environment to meet those people, especially like within the city of Nottingham, all of a similar age group, met some really nice people that I'm still friends with today. And I think it was a really good environment for kind of nurturing a lot of people's kind of talent and allowing us to experiment in roles that we perhaps wouldn't have had any experience in without the academy, to be honest. So yeah.
Um, I went to college, didn't really like school, and then went to Confetti to do film production, and then did the film academy in 2018. And it's sort of the same thing of, didn't really know what I wanted to do, and then you can go to the film academy and sort of figure out, the different roles, which role you want to go into. You weren't tied down to that role. You could help out with other people, which was useful. But you just got to learn from industry professionals, which is good. You'd have panels with them and you'd be able to chat to them, ask them questions, people you wouldn't normally meet or be able to actually talk to. Um, and then obviously going through all the different progressions of making a film of like pre-production, during and after, which helped and it sort of showed you the whole process and in a smaller scale, but that still happens now.
Yeah, thank you. And just out of curiosity, because um, obviously you both did different roles, so actually what you're doing now as a profession, are you able to share what role you took as part of the academy?
Yeah, so I was kind of cinematographer DOP for the film that I was involved in. Which is something I'm still really interested in now, like cinematography and cameras and stuff. But yeah, kind of through university, to be honest, kind of felt a bit more lost as to what I wanted to kind of do. And then through finding locations work, found this area that I wasn't told about in university and things like that, that I actually really enjoyed, that kind of used my brain in a different way. Um, but yeah, so cinematographer for my little short film, which is really fun. First time using professional film equipment. Yeah, really good.
I did cinematography as well. I don't really know why I did it. I think it's a very easy thing for people to want to do, the same as directing. And then you sort of go into the little niche roles, right? And I don't know. So like you could be a gaffer at the film academy, but I don't think you really understand. I don't know. It's hard to understand and like be, really want to go into that. You never hear people really want to go into that until you do it, and then you realize, I don't know. I don't know why I went into it. I just sort of fell into the role after uni. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. But I, I don't know. People ask me if I want to, do cinematography, be a DOP, but I don't know. It's I think you've got time to do it later in life if you want to, sort of actually figure out what you want to do and specialize in one thing and then go to the next role.
Hmm. Because you both went to university, didn't you? So would you mind sharing where you went and what course you did?
Yeah, so I went to study in Leeds, Leeds Arts University, studied filmmaking, um, which was kind of cut in half by COVID. So that kind of had a really big impact on kind of my uni experience and the content of the course, I guess, and also the industry as well at that time. You know, we were meant to go on placements of things filming around Yorkshire, but we just weren't able to because of social distancing and stuff like that. Um, but again, kind of uni similar to BFI gave me those experiences of um, working in a sort of crew dynamic and learning how different roles work and work together and things like that. And essentially, I guess the sort of niche qualities of each role and what makes you good at certain roles, that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, went to uni, loved it, gained a lot of independence. I literally couldn't cook anything before I left for uni, but now, I'm okay. I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I'm all right. But yeah, it was a really good experience. Still friends with people that I met on the first day. And yeah, really good.
Yeah, I went to Arts University of Bournemouth, and it was really good. I don't know. I think people always wonder whether to go to uni or not, but I don't think there's a real answer. It depends. I think it's both good not to go to uni and to go to uni. I found uni good because it was about the people I met and the people who have come out of it and gone into the industry. Um, so then I still work with them, or if they don't want to do a job, I can do a job for them. Um, and uni was good because it taught us how to act on set and set etiquette, which I think is a massive thing. I think that's probably the key thing for getting into film when you're first on set is just knowing, who you can speak to, who you can't speak to, and how to act, which I think will get you further than knowing, loads of technical or, things like that. But really enjoyed uni. I'm glad I went. But then, same as me, halfway through, I had COVID, which sort of put a spanner in the works. But then again, I don't know. It was fine in the end, and it sort of changed the way the industry is now. Um, which I think you adapted to it, which is good, and that's like how you have to be in the industry, right?
Definitely. And I know that Liv, the film that you made as part of your final year project, Bloodshed, which is a documentary, that got you shot you with a DOP on that, weren't you, as well? Did you, and then that went to Berlin Short Film Festival, where it got selected as part of the festival.
Yeah. So did a documentary about periods, endometriosis, and Bloodshed's still going on now. It's getting shown at different festivals and also education things. Went to Berlin with it, which is really fun. Just got shortlisted, but just being able to go and got to speak on a panel and meet other people and sort of understand the process of festivals and stuff. And it got shown in Women in Film, um, which is crazy. It's 3 years on since it got made. It's still doing stuff, which is great. So yeah, I don't know. I think uni gives you the opportunity to make stuff you wouldn't have the chance to make otherwise.
Definitely. And like those transferable skills and contacts, and whether that's like social skills or actual practical or life skills. So definitely, yeah, no, it sounded great. So overcoming early challenges. Obviously, you had through university, you unfortunately the pandemic happened and that scuppered everything for everyone. So obviously that was a massive challenge to overcome. What challenges did you face when first breaking into the industry? Like, and how did you overcome them? And actually, are you still overcoming them, with like other effects of the world of film or just the world in general?
Yeah, I'd say for me, the biggest thing was just gaining contacts working within the industry, which would kind of, well, I was given a few through uni, but I think in terms of securing those first jobs, it didn't have loads of people to kind of turn to and ask for work. None of my family have any background in film or anything like that. So it was kind of doing it completely on my own and with like friends from uni and stuff like that. So I think, yeah, securing those sort of first contacts and just securing the work, that was kind of the biggest challenge, and still kind of is the same challenge because you're constantly looking for the work and seeking it out, you know. But I guess now I'm in a position where I have contacts and I have people I can turn to and certain places to look for work and things like that. So I have a more of a general idea of what to do. But yeah, I'd say that was kind of the hardest thing for me, was just getting started, knowing what I wanted to do. Because to be honest, through my time at uni, I had less of an idea of what I wanted to do than when I'd started, which was quite tough to figure out, like what I want to do in this industry. Like I knew I wanted to be involved in it, but I wasn't sure anymore how. So that was kind of something to overcome, which something I kind of wanted to talk about in this talk is that you can fall into a role like locations or you do camera, whatever, you can fall into a department. You're not set in it for life. You can change career paths. There are other options available there. You know, you're not kind of locked in, which I think is something I was quite fearful of when I was starting out, was that, you know, if I said I wanted to do camera 2 years ago, I have to do camera, but it's just not the case. But yeah, that was my biggest challenges really.
Yeah, I agree that you get worried you'll stay in the same role, but like you can change at any point, right? Um, I came out of uni and then moved back home, and it was just a bit of a shock of being back in Nottingham and just, living with my parents again, which was fine. But I don't know, I didn't want to work at a coffee shop or anything, or I didn't know what to do. So then I joined the Film Academy as assistant to Ella, which really helped because then it meant that contacts that Ella had could get me onto stuff. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, and it was sort of hard to pick anything I wanted to do and, really focus on something. Um, but then I got to work on some BFI shorts, it sort of put me in the process, and then I was sparked on a couple, and I still wasn't sure whether I wanted to do it, um, which is the whole thing. And then it's just, yeah, contacts, living at home, not wanting to get a full-time job, which is really difficult, not wanting to move to London straight away, um, and just earning enough money to make, I was living at home, not earning, having a job here and there with my parents, going, what, earn some money, get a career, so they were the biggest challenges. But then making the jump to move to London after saving up money was the right way for me to do it. And then even when I moved to London, it was difficult because I had a couple of jobs here and there, but not really enough. I wasn't tied down to a place to live, which helped. And I don't think London is the be all and end all either. I think it totally depends on what you want to do and if it works out well. But like, and I still have problems now getting work sometimes, but you just build up more and more contacts. And I also had, confidence issues when I first started. I still do now sometimes, thinking you're not meant to be there, which I think is difficult. I think a lot of people have that. And, speak to people and say they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I think no one knows what they're doing. You sort of fake it till you make it.
Yes. I think that's it's very human to not know, and that's okay. And you're not bound to a career or a job, people change, don't they? Like, I know editors or I know those who used to work in sound who went to editing, and like now they're in marketing and like distribution. So it's, or they've gone off and been like a vet. I don't know. Do you get me? Like you can change your path really. So actually I think I'd like to come back on like battling imposter syndrome, and then but also like knowing actually I'm really capable of doing this and I trust and believe myself, which I feel like again it's very human and very relatable. So I was just wondering if you're able to maybe share some insight on how you manage that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think imposter syndrome is a massive um part of the work sometimes, especially because it can be quite erratic and um, you might apply for work or send off for work, send your CV in, and when you don't get selected, it can sometimes be quite hard to separate um feeling too personal about it, when then it's really not. It's just it's an engagement of employment, I guess. But sometimes you do take those things to heart, and sometimes you will be on set and you're thinking like, what am I doing here? You know, and I shouldn't be here and whatever. But I think as time goes on and as people are continuously hiring you and asking you back onto stuff, I think that gave me a really good sense of, oh no, like I must be doing something good because I'm being asked to return to these jobs and I've developed these contacts who I really get on with. But yeah, I think imposter syndrome is a huge thing. I think especially, to be honest, on some of the bigger scale jobs, like when I've worked on things like The Crown or like Blitz, the scale of those jobs is just insane, and you can just feel like I am just a tiny like speck of dust on this like huge operation. Um, but no, I think with time that dissipates a little bit, but I think it's always a present. But I think it's just managing it through keeping in touch with your friends within the industry and just believing in yourself and the fact that you are getting, if you're getting work in one way or another, someone clearly, you know, has faith in you. Yeah.
Um, like I turned up on set and thought I have no clue what I'm doing, and then someone asked for something and I don't even know what it is. Um, and you want to impress them, but with that sort of thing, I look on my phone and look up the item they want or something, and that's the way you get over it. And you sort of, if you don't know something, just look something up or ask someone, and people won't care. And if people do care, you don't want to be working with them in the first place. People are going to hire you on the basis that they think you can do it or they want you to do it. So I think that helps with feeling like you shouldn't be there. If someone's asked you to be there, they've asked you to be there. Um, yeah, I still get it now, but it's happening less and less. So like I was on small scale jobs and I feel like that, but now obviously if I go onto those jobs, I feel okay now. And then the bigger and bigger, the bigger jobs I get on now, I feel it again. But you just got to fake it till you make it. That's all I can say. I think everyone fakes it till they make it. Like I've had people turn around and go, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, it's fine. You know, no one knows what they're doing really. And at the end of the day, you're making a film. It's not life or death, which I think people put a lot of, it's like, oh, it has to be perfect, everything. But it's fine. It's just a film. And it is amazing being on set. Sometimes I'm like, how is this my job? It's crazy. And, my friends are like, what are you up to? But I don't know. Just understand that people have hired you on purpose for a reason. And if they don't respect that, you don't want to work with them anyway.
So Ed, I know that you've made some slides,
Yeah.
and I know that Harry behind the scenes will gear them up. But I was just wondering, just for both of you, just to say like what role you're in and what role you work in, and then what department you sit in.
Yeah, so I'm a locations assistant within the locations department as a whole. Yeah.
I'm a gaffer, so I work in lighting, but I also work as a spark as well, which is under the gaffer.
Because yeah, you've got some images, haven't you, of so kind of going back to breaking into the industry. Like Ed, I know that you've made these slides. I was wondering if you could elaborate on this, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I've kind of made a lot of these slides as a kind of a bit of a timeline just to sort of show how I've kind of come to be where I am. So yeah, kind of 2021, I've just graduated uni, didn't really know exactly where to go and what to do. Um, had quite a tough time in university, to be honest, through COVID and kind of various other things. And then kind of left uni, wanted to stay living independently in Leeds. In order to do that, I needed to work fundamentally. I had to make some money. So I had a random little job in Bradford that I ended up essentially leaving to go and do COVID cleaning on this big like reality show filming kind of in North Yorkshire. And even though it was literally COVID cleaning, like we were going around spraying door handles all day, it kind of gave me my first experience like seeing how like on a big scale how productions function essentially, and all the roles involved. And I mean, if you can see from the sort of first two images, like the sort of this was a big site. We were in like a big kind of country house estate in North Yorkshire, and it was a kind of like almost temporary home for a lot of these people who were there for I think about 3 months. So yeah, did that COVID cleaning job, and then kind of towards the end of that shoot, as we kind of were talking to other departments, ended up talking to the art department, and we ended up getting a few days of work with them, helping them to de-rig all of their equipment and props and stuff like that, which is really fun and really insightful to like how they function and just kind of the scale of it. Like you can see in this image on the right, like the amount of just chairs and stuff like this that were used in that production was insane, but really eye-opening. And yeah, if Harry, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please. So did that previous job until the around October 2021, and then had a few bits of like bar work and just random little jobs. And then managed to get another COVID job on a BBC show that filming in Leeds, just up the road from where I live, so it was perfect. And then again, kind of through being around that environment, became friendly with the locations department because I'd seen the work they were doing on set and thought, oh, well, that seems really interesting and something that I didn't really know about before starting out at all. So it kind of gave me my first instance of being like a studio, and this image in the middle, we got to go to this really like big mansion in Harrogate, which was really cool, and we were kind of like safe-proofing that for the crew and stuff. And yeah, it kind of gave me first, I guess, more on-hand experience on set, you know. Yeah, Harry, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide again, please. So as better finishes, I then get more work with locations department, and then I'm kind of like running around kind of Yorkshire and Manchester a bit, kind of just securing work where I can, even if it's a day here and there. Managed to get experience on kind of bigger scale stuff like The Crown and Steve McQueen's Blitz, which was really, really cool. Got to see like this arcade in the middle here, dressed like kind of era specific kind of advert stuff, really, really cool. And then on the image on the right, if you can sort of faintly see the person in the background, that's me doing a brilliant job shielding some actors out the back of the church that we're filming in. But yeah, the bigger scale stuff kind of, I think, opened my eyes a bit to like how productions vary, and how much manpower there was on the kind of bigger scale stuff, and just the kind of craft that goes into it. Not to take away from smaller scale stuff that I still work on and was still doing around this time. But yeah, I think it was just a really cool, that was a kind of moment of like, oh, okay, I'm working in like the film business now, you know, seeing like 1940s cars like parked up on the road, and just the amount of effort going in, that felt like a Hollywood movie, you know. So that was really cool. If we could have the next slide, please, Harry. And then kind of, yeah, did location marshalling for most of those jobs, and then kind of through experience managed to get assistant credit, so it's a bit more responsibility, and you're doing a bit more on set essentially, and you're kind of the first point of contact for the crew. And then yeah, worked in Sheffield on a Disney Plus show that was really, really cool. And then kind of towards the end of 2023, I was aware that winter was coming up, which is a very quiet time for the industry, and I knew that I needed to essentially keep the money coming in. So I got a job at a restaurant, which was really good for me because I could work there full time. And then as bits of film work came up, they were always really flexible with letting me like swap shifts or jump around, stuff like that. And I think for me, it was really good for my mental health, because sometimes in an industry like this where you're not guaranteed your next paycheck, having that routine and that structure in my life was really good for me, at being able to sort of just function essentially. I'm not someone who can kind of just what like I don't know, amble through life. Like I need to sort of have like a routine and the kind of structure to it. So and also money to live, when you've got rent to pay and bills to pay, you fundamentally need the money coming in. If we could have the next slide, please, Harry. Last year, carried on working with various sort of scale jobs, few bits of like kids TV and stuff like this, as well as some sort of bigger scale stuff. Um, yeah. What else to say? I At this time I was working at a restaurant. I was doing my film work, and I was working for like a kind of marquee company. So I was kind of juggling several jobs, which was tiring. It was hard. Like I really like the physical work, but it is tiring. And when you're kind of working to live, it can be quite tough. Um, but again, my other jobs were really flexible with letting me, when a job would come up maybe for a week or more, um, my restaurant job would let me have it, like let me go off and do it. I had one week where I was essentially alternating each day, where I would do restaurant and then film and then restaurant and film, and I was doing back and forth, which is I would never do that again, to be honest. It was awful. But yeah, I kind of just wanted to demonstrate like the importance of having another job, I think, for your mental health and for your finances. Like it's really important. Yeah, if we could have the next slide, please, Harry. Um, these are kind of some of my highlights from the last sort of year or two. So on the far left, we have Teesside Airport being used as JFK Airport in New York for a Amazon Prime film, which I just found incredibly funny. You're having all these like yellow New York cabs driving around like the Northeast, is just really funny to me. And then Sure, second series of Sherwood was a real highlight for me because we got to film in Nottingham. So that was a really cool experience, and like knowing the locations of like Nottingham Castle and knowing the best routes around the locations and stuff like that was really, really cool. Um, yeah, that job was kind of a highlight for me. Really nice crew. Yeah, I can't remember what else I would put on this PowerPoint. Um, yeah, that's maybe me done for the moment, I guess, before we talk about equipment and stuff like that.
And then obviously depending on whether it's a kids show or a feature or you're at Teesside Airport, like what are your duties and responsibilities as locations assistant?
So you, as a location assistant and kind of locations as a whole, as a department, you are kind of the middle man or middle ground between kind of the public and the film crew and the kind of bubble of the sort of film crew. You're kind of the liaison often between like building managers or people's houses that you might be filming in. You're the one kind of responsible for dealing and upkeeping that kind of dialogue. And then on set, it's things like dishing out work lights if you're filming at night, and things like it's not glamorous, but things like bins, potentially like kind of safeguarding certain locations, like if you think they might be a hazard to someone, making green rooms for cast. What else? Also marshalling the public, like if you're working in a public space and you need it to be like held tight, essentially you'll be kind of there asking the public like politely if they can like wait 5 minutes while you like get certain shots, that kind of thing. And you're essentially a kind of, I think if for anyone who's worked in hospitality, it's quite similar in that rather than customers, it's crew, and you're anticipating their needs and what they are going to want in order to be able to do their job successfully. So it's kind of facilitating the rest of the crew essentially. It's kind of a service role, I guess. And it's not creative in the same way as something like camera or art department, but it's creative in a kind of more logistical and practical sense, I guess. And that it's problem solving and overcoming like unforeseen things that just happen, but buskers on the street that you need to disappear for an hour or two, it's talking to them and things like that. Essentially, it's just kind of making sure the thing can run smoothly, essentially.
Cool. And then thank you for that. And in your department, are you able to share like who is alongside you in terms of location assistant? And then obviously they say there isn't a hierarchy in film, but actually there kind of is for responsibility and communication and like task flow. Are you able to share who is in your department and where you sit within that, please?
Yeah, sure thing. So, kind of first entry level role within locations is marshalling. So you are there purely kind of or mostly handing out equipment and speaking to the public and like locking off certain streets, things like this. And then assistant is a bit more responsibility. You're maybe planning a bit more. You're allocating kind of the equipment and maybe what's the word? Giving instructions, I guess, to marshals and kind of you have a bit more of a sense of the way it operates and what the kind of requirements of each shoot they are. So yeah, a bit more responsibility. And then above that, you have a unit manager who is kind of um, it's a unit manager's a weird job, but you're kind of in charge of the facilities of the crew. So things like the production offices, like having the caterers having water. It's a lot of resource management and things like this, and kind of juggling different parts, fuel, generators, this kind of thing, arranging where crew are going to park. If you're in like some tiny suburban street in Sheffield, where are we going to park some massive like 18-ton truck? It's these kind of things. And then location manager is kind of the overhead kind of overseer of all of these things and kind of the head honcho, I guess. On sort of bigger jobs you'll have maybe a supervising location manager who would be in charge of multiple different people managing different sites independently. And then yeah, kind of alongside you, depending on the side of the job, you might have multiple assistants, you might have multiple marshals. It kind of scales with the size of and the budget of the job really and the demands of the job. But yeah, that's kind of it, I think.
Well, thank you. Um, just going to pause you there for a minute, Ed, if that's right, and then we're going
Yeah.
to jump into lighting, if that's all right. Are you able to put the slides up, please? So yeah, Liv, obviously you've mentioned that you have worked as a gaffer and a spark, but I was wondering if you're able to share insight on the lighting department and then the varying duties and responsibilities in terms of those roles.
Yeah, so as a simple version, I don't think this doesn't apply to all sets because some are smaller, some are bigger. But as a simple basic version, you've got the DOP, the cinematographer, and underneath that is the gaffer. So the DOP will say how they want it to look, or they'll make a lighting plan, or say to the gaffer how they want to light it, or and then that's the role of the gaffer. And then the gaffer will delegate all these different things to the people underneath them. So sometimes you have a best person, sometimes called best boy, but we're trying to change it to called best person. They're usually in charge of power distribution on bigger scale things. It totally depends on what you're on. A lot of the time, you won't have a best person on jobs if you're on smaller scale jobs, even commercials. But yeah, so then Spark is underneath that, and the Spark will speak to the best person or the gaffer. And depending on how big the scale is, again, the gaffer probably won't leave the DOP side, and then they'll delegate those roles. So sometimes the Spark will only speak to the best person, or sometimes the Spark can speak to the gaffer as well. And then underneath that, you've got a trainee, which is someone who will come on and not, they could have no clue or have a bit of a clue. And it's the role of everyone else to sort of help them get to grips with it. If I can go to the next slide, please. So lights. People always ask me what I do, and it's really, it's difficult to explain. My friends take the mix saying that, you just turn on a button and a light comes on. But these are lighting stands and some lights and some power, which is on the bottom left. So on each set, you're gonna have different equipment, but you're gonna see the same thing over and over again. And on the right there, stands called long johns. I'm not going to go through the names of everything, but so when I first went to set, someone said get a long john. I didn't know what that was, and I just searched it up and I found it, and it was fine. Um, and depending on where you are, you're going to use different equipment. So on the right, you can see it's rough ground. It's on a farm. So that's why we use them because they have big wheels, easy to push around. You can put big lights on them. They can go up tall if you want. And on the left, you've got some smaller stands, which you could use anyway. You can use it in smaller places. They're more stable. It all depends. I'm going to go to the next slide, please. So on the whole, you use tungsten and LED lights. So on the left is LED, which is newer, and on the right is tungsten. So with LED, there's brands like Aperture, Nanlite, Amaran. There's so many lighting brands, but they're the ones that stick out. And I remember I came out of uni and we didn't use any of the LED stuff, and I thought, I have no clue what this is. Actually, they're very simple to use. Once you set them up once, you'll understand. And they're the main leading people for it. And on the right, you've got tungsten, so they're actual bulb, a singular bulb in there usually. They draw a lot more power, so that means you need, sometimes you can't just plug it into the wall and the mains in a house. You have to have a generator. And they have a certain look tungsten, so people, you're not always going to use tungsten on the right, and you're not always going to use LED, or you might use a mix. And it totally depends on how how the DP wants it to look, how the gaffer likes to light things, and it all depends. It's not the same for anything. But with bulbs on the right, they can blow. So technically, there's more issues that usually older than the ones on the left. And you can have bicolor with LED, which means you can change the color of stuff. So it can be pink, red, blue, anything. And on the right, you can't. But I'll talk about that. But it all depends on the DP saying how they want it to look and what the style they want. Can I go on the next slide, please? So how do you put lights up, high up? And you see that. So on the left is a feature I was on last year. And those green things are cherry pickers. And on the right is some scaff that a rigger would build. So riggers will come in for jobs and they'll build stuff for you. And there's a light on top of that. So a lot of the time you won't be putting a light up at the top of there, or you will be putting a light up at the top of there, but they would have built it for you. It's important to make sure that it's all safe. So it's scaffolding on the right. So you can get scaffolding, people won't come in, they'll be called riggers. And you can get a cherry picker license. So that means I can drive one of those, and that I can put stuff up high. I can adjust the blue screen. I can adjust all the scaffolding and the truss. So at the top, that's called truss. And what I'm stood on the blue is a scissor lift, which goes straight up, as opposed to the cherry picker. It can go forward, up, and it can go all the way around. Yeah, go to the next slide, please. So there's another image of the cherry picker being used. I think that's a DOP on the cherry picker. So sometimes a DOP will stand on one, or sometimes you'll put a light on the top of one. If you want to get to really high, you can control it from the bottom. And yeah, next slide, please. So different grip equipment. There's so many different pieces. I couldn't put them all on here, but basics on the left is a lollipop head, which you put that onto a stand so you can attach stuff to it. Then in the middle, it's called a K clamp. So that can attach the stuff to put fabrics onto stuff. It can hold it there, or it's got a little pin in it so you can put a light on top of that. And on the right, you've got a Cardellini clamp, which can clamp to anything, and you can put a light on the end of that. But you couldn't put a big light on the end of that. You'd have to have scaffolding. So everything I use, you can't use everything for everything. It has to be safe. It all changes. They all don't have a certain purpose, and you can make different things with them and use them for different things. But on the whole, they help you mount things. So whether that is fabrics or that's light. Next slide, please. And then this is what you call distro. I remember I was on a job a couple of years ago, and someone said, what distro do you want? to the gaffer, and I had no clue what that was. And it essentially means the power cables and what they go into and how they can be distributed out. So that's called 16 amp. So there's 13 amp, which is your general household, so you can plug that into a wall. And then the next scale for that is 16 amp, and then it goes up and up and up. And depending on what light you're using and how much power it needs, so the bigger the light, the more power it needs, you'll have different cables, and you can step down, you can step up. So that means you can go from a 16 to a 32 to a 63. It's all very confusing when you first get into it, but the more you do it, the more you understand it. So I didn't really know much about it until I went onto jobs, and I just did it, or I just tried it. And on the whole, if you don't know what you're doing, you're just going to ask someone and then explain it to you, or you just see how someone else has done it next to you. 9 out of 10 times you're going to have another spark next to you, and they'll be sound enough to show you how to do it. And with distro and power, it depends where you're getting it from, how much you need. Sometimes you use generators, and there are new electric generators which are quieter, but generators are loud. On sets, on narrative sets, they're recording sound, so it's all about sort of figuring that out, or having a generator really far away, but then you've got to run cables all the way from the generator to the light. So it's all just about sort of figuring it out, problem solving, stuff like that. Next slide, please. Fabrics. So they call it fabrics, textiles. On the left, you've got a T-bar, so that's a stand, and then you've got some frame pieces which we've stretched out and we've attached, and then we've tied on a fabric called Bolton that's used to black out a lot of the time, or to create something called negative fill. So a lot of the time you think with lighting, you just want as much light as possible, but it can look nicer if you have a bit of Bolton on one side, because it creates shape on your face rather than just having light everywhere. And then on the right, we've got some long johns with an ultra bounce. So we've got light splatting into that, and you can tell by the picture how much light is emitting from that. And you bounce off something as opposed to having a light straight onto you if you want it to be softer. People want soft light or want hard light. It's all interchangeable with DOPs and the sort of look you want, and you want it to look realistic. You don't want it to look saucy, which would mean it looks like you've got a light source bouncing straight onto you. And if you're battling with the sun, that's when you use Bolton to black out big windows. Sometimes you use a thing called Corex, which you stick onto windows, but sometimes, in that location on the left, you weren't allowed to do that because it'd damage it. So you'd put a big T-bar of Bolton, or you'd put it on the inside of the place if it didn't matter. But it'd be nice to put it on the outside of the building. But sometimes you're a couple levels up, or it's windy, or you're not allowed to. So it's all just interchangeable with each set you're on. Can I get to the next set, please? The next slide. So equipment that I have on me. On the left is a voltage tester. So I can go to a cable, and if it lights up red, that means there's power going through it. So if you're having a problem, the light's not turning on, you can put that on and see if there's power going through it. Or if there isn't power going through it, you'll know that there's another issue somewhere else. Below that is electrical tape, or lecky tape, people call it. That's good for wrapping up cables or equipment, or just putting stuff on stuff. It's not that strong, but it's good to keep organized. Got gloves in the middle there. They're good for when it's wet, when it's cold, when it's hot, when lights can be really hot. They also just help you move stuff because you're carrying a lot of heavy stuff, especially if you're on location, you're going, from field to field. You've got zip ties, which you use to attach fabrics to stuff, or if you've got a ballast, which is something you connect to a light and control the light with, they can be heavy. So you use a zip tie to attach that to the stand so it's connected to it. And then you've got a Leatherman, which is the brand of that, or just a toolkit. So you can cut stuff, you can, cut rope, cut gels. Gels are things you put in front of lights. So with a tungsten light, you can't change the color. You can put a CTB on, which is color temperature blue, which will change it to be blue. So you use that to cut the roll of gels. And I think that's it. Maybe I've got another slide. Oh, here we go. So this is a lighting plan. It's my friend Charlie. He's a gaffer who I work for a lot. This is his lighting plan. So when you're speaking to the DOP, they might make the lighting plan and they might not. It depends. But this just means when we get on set, I as a spark, or if spark's under me, I can show them this and go, this is the plan. So the green things are lights, or you've got the 12 by 12 ultra bounce. You can see that's one of those big fabrics which bounces light. Um, and you've got 600D Pro in the top left corner, which is a light. It's all very confusing words, but once you know the equipment, it's easy to understand. And if you don't know what it is, look it up. And if you don't know, ask someone. So each set's going to change. You usually get like a plan of the building you're going to be in. So you've already got, where power is going to be. You can find, where the sockets are, or if there isn't enough power, you can sort that out beforehand, which you'll do on a tech recce beforehand, which is where you go with the DOP to the set, and just take photos of everywhere, figure out how big it is, figure out what you're not allowed to do, and what you are allowed to do inside there. Yeah. Go to the slide, please. So this was in Wakefield. That's my friend Adrian on the left. We were at a coal mining museum, but the coal mine was still not active, but you could go down there. And we were filming down there, but you're not allowed to bring lights down which aren't already plugged in because it creates a spark and it can explode. So a lot of it was all problem solving. So we decided that we'd bring power down, so like a little box of which has power already, and small lights that we could bring down. We'd plug it in already up at the top, go down in the lift to the bottom of the mine, and so it'd be already plugged in. So it's all about problem solving depending on where you're at. Sometimes you can use loads of lights, and sometimes you use not many at all, which we did here as well. Next slide, please. So this is a feature I was on. There's Charlie in the middle. He was a gaffer. So it depends on the scale you're on. So this looks like this is so much equipment, And the last one we had hardly any. On this one, you have loads. And a lot of this is just about distributing power and going up into the gods, which is in studios you have a thing called gods where you can go to the top and you can rig lights so they can be right at the top, looking down, 40 foot in the air. It's all different scales of stuff, and I don't think any are better than others. Some are harder than others. With this, I was getting up at 5:30 a.m. and getting back at 8 p.m., which is really tough. And I still do that with other jobs. I get up really early, I get back really late, but then I won't be working for the rest of the week. So yeah, I think that's the last of it.
Yeah, I've got quite a few follow-up questions about how locations and lighting work together. So that's kind of why that's why I've designed this session, because obviously you've mentioned like heritage and a coal mine, like a mining museum. So we'll put a little pin in that. But Ed, I was wondering if you're able to share some more slides and images just about what kit you use, because obviously locations and lighting are very different
Sure.
in terms of
Yeah.
like necessities. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we can see here on the very left, this is like a ridiculously filled locations van, to be honest. But you can see, so those kind of silvery triangular bits in the bottom left, they are easy ups, which is basically like a portable kind of pop-up tent that you can kind of throw up and take down on the fly. So if you're shooting outside, really useful. You can pop them up for crew, like hair and makeup. They often want to sit in them so that they can better see their monitors. You'll probably have one for the director. We've got traffic cones, fire extinguishers, which a big part of locations is health and safety. So that's why that's there. Like the big red sort of flat things there, like barriers. And then you can see nicely dotted across the top there is bins, because that's ultimately a big part of locations. And then in this middle top image, we have like a little like standard no frills green room type situation with a makeup mirror that we would often distribute, carry around. Image underneath is of a big mansion up in Harrogate, and I kind of included that to as a talking point to talk about like when you're working on these jobs and as locations, you're there, as I mentioned earlier, kind of to liaise between the crew and um, people's houses or landowners and business managers and stuff like that. So that was kind of an example of a kind of place where you're really having to think on how's best to kind of to cover your department and the production, because if anything gets damaged, that's going to incur a cost and you're going to get invoiced, you know. And then on the right, that sort of absolute wall of text is from when I worked on Blitz. So I received that from my boss, assistant location manager, who all of these things were kind of tasks I had to do. We had 300 child supporting artists or extras um, coming into this place as kind of like a green room environment. So, and it was kind of an old office building. So th this list is essentially everything that I kind of had to go around and do before we had these kids coming in. So yeah, it's a lot of kind of safe proofing environments and making sure that no one can hurt themselves. Yeah, if we could have the next slide, please. Equipment. So like things you would have on you on a daily basis. Um, Gloves hugely important. Your hands are going to get dirty and you're going to be using equipment that could potentially like damage your fingers, such as the Leatherman just above it. So that is like a kind of lifesaver in terms of like getting things unstuck, unscrewing things, that are just a general cutting tape, cutting cardboard, cutting Corex, cutting yeah, all sorts. Head torch. So useful. You don't want to have your hands um, carrying a torch if you've got to carry some like massive heavy piece of equipment. So head torch always useful. And then underneath that is just a little work like portable work light. Always good for if you're working at night or in the dark. And then to the left, we've kind of got what three words, which for anyone who doesn't know is kind of it's just like Google Maps, but it puts every I think it's every 3 square meters or something, and it gives it an individual combination of 3 words. So that's really useful if you're in like a remote location that maybe doesn't have like precise GPS and stuff like that. So what 3 words incredibly useful. And then yeah, Google Maps, any maps, just as your kind of sense of to help you with your sense of direction and orientation. A big part of the job is being able to turn up to a location and know that you've never been to before and immediately be able to know where things are, where the equipment is, and where you know you're going to park, like the lighting trucks, things like that. Yeah, I think I've got one more slide, maybe. No? Cool. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. So I know that, well, for those who may not know, there is actually quite a bit of crossover between locations and lighting. I was just wondering if you're both able to share what that crossover is, whether it's on long or short form, so either a short or like a series or a feature, or even like a commercial or whatnot. I was just wondering if you're able to discuss that.
Yeah, so kind of as Liv mentioned, talking about like the power supply, that's a big thing with locations. So we would be in charge of acquiring generators and positioning them and knowing where's best to put them and where things like cable could go. Like if you're filming in a residential area, you're trying to minimize impact on them. Yeah, so a power supply is a massive one, and there's quite a lot of um kind of crossover with the departments in that sense of thinking about power, thinking about how you can source electricity, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I filmed at Richmond Park before in London, and there was, we had so much equipment and big Luton vans with full of stuff, and a lot of it was speaking to location, of knowing where we could park, knowing how to get to the location. So they'd make on the call sheet, you'd have that way to go through Richmond Park. You're only allowed to go through one entrance and out the other, and then about where we could put equipment when we were on location, and where we were allowed to stand. So, there was grass that you weren't allowed to go on because it was, I don't know, the only grass in the UK like that. So that was a lot of location telling us, okay, you can put this here, but you can't put this here. And sort of delegating that, I think. And like you said, with power, knowing where we can put the generators, having, the easy ups up for us to put equipment under when it's raining and stuff like that. Yeah.
Great. And I know that you've referenced a call sheet, so I was wondering if you're able to share for those who aren't aware, like what a call sheet is and actually where you sit on that and when your day starts and when it ends. So yeah, if you could elaborate, please.
So call sheet you get sent in the morning or the no, not the morning, the evening before. Sometimes a couple of days before, but usually the night before. It's usually quite late, which is a bit annoying if you're waiting to go to sleep. And it will tell you about the next day of who's going to be there, what role they have, numbers, where you need to go, what you're going to be filming that day, just general things, where the closest train station is, where you can park, just everything you need to know for the next day, and everyone's going to be there, and everyone's contact number, so if you ever get into trouble. Yeah, and I'll look through that all day to know, what time lunch is, where lunch is going to be. If you've got a unit base, which is somewhere where you're not filming there, but it's somewhere away from the location. Um, and yeah, and it's good if I need to ring someone, or it's usually great for the first day you're on set because you get to see everyone who's going to be there, and understand how many people are going to be there. But it gives you the scale and to know, what you're going to be filming that day.
Yeah, that's it. It's basically a rundown of each day, kind of very useful to knowing like what scene's coming up next, how you can sort of plan for that. Um, yeah, as Liv said, it's got all the contact details of everyone, things like lunch, things like the weather forecast. It's basically like a kind of summary of each day. And sometimes you'll also have a forgetting what it's called. Um, Forgetting the word, but sometimes you have a separate document that will show you specific route to take. So like as Liv mentioned with Richmond Park, sometimes you may only be able to get like vehicles in through a certain direction. Or I don't know, maybe only be able to park in certain areas. So yeah, you I'm really struggling to remember this word, I should know. But yeah, yeah.
And it also asks you to whether like bring waterproofs or like sun cream, and it's like that's the sheet that has all the relative information on, isn't it? So what, depending on whether it's long form or short form, so whether it's like a commercial or a short film or something that's long form, which is like a feature or a TV series, are you able to elaborate? Are you able to share like the difference of timings of when you'd be needed and when you'd wrap and then when you might need a D rig. So, and if you can explain what those terms mean as well.
Yeah, so in locations, you're quite often the first ones in and the last ones out because you're there in the start of the day to kind of get things ready, make sure everything's like working and good to go, and then at the end of the day, you're there to kind of like a D-rig, which is essentially kind of taking down or putting away any equipment that you don't no longer need. If you're moving locations kind of day to day, you'll often be bringing out a limited sort of selection of equipment and then packing it away each day. I guess production to production, like a larger scale production, so something like The Crown, there's often enough money to have several people within your department, like several location assistants, several marshals. So often you might work in shift patterns. So you might start really early, but you'll finish earlier than everyone else. Some people will arrive before the kind of call time, which is when you're expected to kind of be on set. Some people will arrive earlier but then finish before wrap, whereas some people might start at the call time or later, and then finish later to help with the D-rig and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it kind of depends on the scale of the production. I'd say typically on smaller scale stuff, like on kids' TV or just smaller budget films, you will probably be there the whole day, which can sometimes be like 12, 13 hour days. Um, yeah, it kind of varies production to production, but that's kind of the overall vibe. Yeah.
Um, Within the lighting department, you can have something called pre-light, which is where you come before the filming starts. It can vary the amount of time. It can be a week, it can be a day, it can be even longer, and that means you can pre-light. So you get all the equipment in and you light it so that when they come in on, when they start filming, it's already set up. Um, And sometimes you have pre-call as well. If you don't have pre-lights, a pre-call is, you come in an hour or two before the call time of everyone else. So it gives you time to sort of equipment. And that's when you see locations as well. They'll already be there, which is helpful. And then you have D-rig sometimes, not always, usually on bigger scale stuff, where you come in, you just have days dedicated to D-rigging, taking everything down, getting equipment into a van, and organizing all the equipment, to go back to the kit house. A kit house is a place you get equipment from. And yeah, that's usually on bigger scale stuff. But usually you're there quite early, just after locations, and usually you leave quite late. I don't know. I feel like it takes a long time because you've got to get all the stuff in and then you set it all up and you've got to get it all back out and pack back in. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So I was just wondering if there's any particular equipment or resort, like a new resource that's coming out that you're interested to try. So I remember when What Three Words came out because it was on an advert on TV for those kind of extreme hikers and like Alaska or whatever, like for that I think it was used originally for like emergency services to find you if you were lost in the wilderness, but actually that's being taken on board a lot by like the screen industry. Like, is there anything that you're like, oh, I'm quite keen to test this out and try? And that's for you as well, Liv.
I'm personally not really sure. I'm sure there probably are things that I've not even really thought of, but I think yeah, a lot of things like What Three Words, for example, things kind of get um utilized by the film industries a bit because people realize, oh, I could use this for that kind of thing. A big one, to be fair, actually recently has been like banking apps and things like is it Revolut and like Monzo and things like this can be really good for distributing your money and paying people. So that's probably a big change that's happened within the last sort of like 5 to 10 years. But other than that, I think a big thing for me that I'm aware of in the film industry is sometimes you're using kind of single-use disposable products. So I'm kind of hoping to see a lean towards like more like reusable products, like things like zip ties and or compostable bin bags, like simple things like that. But I hope that that kind of becomes the norm as time goes on. But yeah, apart from that, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I agree. There's so much waste on set. It's crazy. Like, people will say bring single, no, reusable cups and stuff and bottles, but no one does, and everyone loses them, and the amount of stuff that gets chucked away afterwards is crazy. I totally agree with that. It's just, yeah, I don't think it's a very sustainable industry at the moment, um, which isn't very good, and no one really sees it because it's like a glamorous, you know, film industry, like you're making a film. But I don't know. I think when you're creating that much waste, how glamorous can it be? But in terms of new equipment that's coming out, I mean, there's always stuff going out and get all nerdy about lights and stuff. But I don't know, lights are getting smaller and more powerful, which is interesting. And it's all going LED and everything's. I don't know. There's nothing in particular I'm really looking forward to using, but I guess there's the new Nan light out, which is a company, and it's just a more powerful light. And LED is becoming the thing that people use now as opposed to tungsten. So I guess I don't know, new lights, which is such a broad thing, but new equipment, new lights that's coming out.
Great, thank you. So now we've got about 10 minutes before we need to move on to the Q&A. So I've got quite a lot to squash in. So I was wondering for both of you, have you undergone any other additional training that's really been essential for the work that you do?
So for me, when I was starting out, we were kind of still in COVID, so there was like online training that you had to do to have a kind of basic awareness of coronavirus on set, which if you didn't do that, you were not allowed on set at all. So that at the time was essential. Screen skills offer things like bullying and harassment training, which is really good. Um, I've done things like unpaid, had experienced location scouting just to get a sense of how it worked and what the kind of things that you do. So there's little opportunities like that where if you're willing to do it, you can, there's little pockets of kind of experience you can kind of get here and there. In terms of formal training, I know that there are certain courses you can do, like I think Northern Film and Television School offer kind of a quite comprehensive like location management course, and there seems to be quite a lot down in London of just full length courses. But for me, it's kind of more been on job kind of learning day by day, I guess. But yeah.
There's a couple of qualifications you can do. As a gaffer, you don't really need them. It's more sparks and best persons that best persons that get these qualifications. But I still think it's very useful, and I still work as a spark sometimes. So there's something called BS7909, which deals with generator power. So that's good for being on a location. And then there's something else called your level two electrical qualification, which is a longer course where you really get to grips with, electricity, which is what you're dealing with. And screen skills, I think, offer bursaries for that. Not all the time, but I think there's one just before Christmas that I think everyone, you should always apply for. Um, and then obviously with screen skills, they do a trainee course, but they don't do it for lighting. So I think they do it for camera, production design, and a lot more, but they don't do it specifically for lighting. And they get you on training as a trainee on bigger jobs, which I think is a great thing to, if I could have done that in lighting, I would have. I know so many people have done it, and that's their way to get in the industry.
Cool. And I'm going to answer a live question. I'm going to ask you to answer a live question if that's all right. So Will's put, do qualifications matter for getting hired? And that's for both of you.
Fundamentally, no, for me. I didn't need my film degree in order to become a location marshal or assistant. It's more about your personality and your ability to kind of communicate with people. Not to say that uni isn't a valuable kind of experience at all, but I think at least in my role, experience is kind of the key thing. There are, as I said, courses you can do that will give you that experience, but I wouldn't say anything is kind of fundamental, at least for me.
Yeah, I don't think qualification matters. I don't think uni or college matters. I think it's always good to have education and do, education is great and it's such a good gateway, but I don't think it's vital. And with electrical qualifications, no, it's not vital in smaller jobs. I've gone this far without it. But if you want to get on bigger jobs, it always depends. But they a lot of the time they do want you to have your electrical qualification. But sometimes you can go onto jobs and then they'll pay for you to get it done. But I've gone on this long and I've not had it, so I don't think it's vital. And when I first started, I asked so many gaffers. I said, "Should I get it? Should I get it?" And most of the time they go, "No, it doesn't matter." It just depends. I think I'm going to do mine eventually. I'm just going to wait until a bursary comes around, but it's not vital. But I've got enough, time and disposable income that means I can do it now.
Wow. And you want to just have that, it's having that reassurance, isn't it? Of
Yeah,
just
yeah,
you've got it, and then in case if there is something that you're
yeah.
really interested to work on, and then they're like, you have to have this, you're like, excellent, I'm eligible. So in the few final minutes before the Q&A, I wanted to chat about passion and resilience, because obviously the industry landscape has changed, whether that's like global pandemic or the writers' strikes. So I wanted to ask you both, like, how do you stay creatively inspired in an industry that can demand so much?
Um, I think for me, a big thing, it's going to sound really obvious, but just watching film and TV that you really enjoy, I think that is something that gives me like perspective on why I like do the work that I do. I think when you work in the industry, you kind of view TV and film like stuff in a bit of a different light because you can kind of see how it's getting made a little bit more. But I think when you watch something like really good that really speaks to you, it can be really inspiring and really affirming to like, oh, this is why I work in this industry. It's because I love it. Um, yeah.
I think it's hard. You've got to love it. You really have to love it, and you won't always love it, and that's fine. But sometimes I don't love it. I find it really stressful. But a lot of the time, I'm like, I love this. I love my job. I work with people I really like. And that's important. Work with people you want to work with, and that can't always be the case. But don't put up with people treating you badly, because some people do. It's only happened to me a couple of times, but some people, aren't nice, which is like any industry, isn't it? But it's not putting up with that. I think it's not, again, it's not life or death. People get put into really dangerous situations. I've seen injuries happen. I've seen people get really upset, and it's just a film, it's fine. And I know it's money, it's income, but if you set yourself up in a way, you work really hard, you'll make it. And there's no set way of getting into it, but it's just being resilient, working with people you like. And if you don't like the role you're training in or something like that, that's fine. You can move to a different department. I've been on set and seen people go to other departments when it's the right time, the most, appropriate time, and gone, oh, I really like this. Can I help out at all? And 9 out of 10 times I say yes.
Well, thank you. And I was just wondering, so obviously it can be really stressful and a really high pressure environment. Like, how do you maintain work-life balance? And also, is that like personal hobbies and like interests?
Yeah, so yeah, having like hobbies, and especially anything creative, I think that's really important because it stimulates a different part of your brain. Obviously, when you're working really long days, when you get home, sometimes you just want to like crash and just kind of turn your brain off. But I think on your days off, like in like the weekends and stuff, it's really important to use that time well and go for walks, do some exercise, do something creative. That is something I think really important. Because otherwise your whole life just feels like work. When you're working these quite intense hours for weeks on end, it can feel like your whole life is the job. So I think as much as on the weekends, sometimes you just want to sit on the sofa and just be like a potato. It's important to use that time well and I don't know, just to keep your brain ticking essentially. See your friends, check in with people. Yeah, thing like set make events, make plans with people, go to dinner, I don't know. Just make sure you're balancing your own personal life and that you're not just completely sucked in the job. But yeah.
Yeah, I think freelance is hard because, it consumes your whole life. You don't know when you're going to get work. And it's hard to say no to jobs, which I've found. I always say yes no matter what. And I even make plans. I'm really sorry, I can't go. So I think it's important to say no sometimes to jobs, even if you think, oh, it's not going to come around again. It always will. Work with people you like, I think. Um, you know, and I think it consumes your life, the film industry. So it's important to have friends outside of it. Because I've got so many friends in it, and they're great. But all I talk about is film, and we go out and all we're just talking about everything all the time, and it's great. But you need to hang around with people who aren't in it. That gives you, I don't know, a break from it. And I find it hard because I use Instagram as a way to get work. So I don't like I do like Instagram, but I don't like being on it all the time. So it's just I'll be at home even not working, and I'll still reply to emails all the way into the evening. It's like, no, just you can have this time off and wait until the morning to reply. And if you don't, if they say you haven't got, I've had it before. I haven't replied in the evening, and by the time in the morning I reply, they said, oh, it's gone. It doesn't matter. It's fine.
Thank you. Yeah, it really is essential to trying to separate work and life. Let's not do a severance thing, but yeah, try and find a balance. And yeah, like I'm kind of similar with Instagram and WhatsApp because people can contact you on WhatsApp. I'm like, but I just want to chat to my friends about Married at First Sight and just rubbish or just like, try and sort something out with family. So definitely trying to find the balance is great. Right, we're going to squeeze in some questions if that's okay. So I've got one from Ashley. Oh, hopefully I've said your name right, sorry. So this is for Ed. So where does location scale sit within the locations hierarchy? And is it only required pre-production as a separate role, or will the location manager do this as well?
Good question. Location manager, sorry, location scout. It tends to be, I think you're kind of more um, location managers that kind of tend to to sort of do that kind of stuff because they kind of have the most experience in dealing with people and negotiating fees and stuff like that. Um, yeah, it kind of sits, I guess, slightly outside of the kind of typical hierarchy a little bit because you're kind of doing that work beforehand, often before like the first shot has been taken of the film. You know, it's quite early days. You know, it's you're doing that in pre-production. Yeah, let me reread the question. Um, is it any required pre-production and stuff? Okay, yeah. So I'd say yeah, it's typically done in pre-production, and if everything was kind of like ran smoothly, you would never have to scout again. But quite often, locations may become unusable or just something happens and you can't use it anymore. So quite often you're on the fly like we've got to, for example, we've got to find like a corner shop like now, you know. So you're kind of running around trying to find somewhere suitable and still bearing those things in mind, like where you're going to park, your crew, and where certain things are going to go and things like that. So yeah, typically in pre-production, but mostly, well, no, it should all be in pre-production, but sometimes you're doing a bit on the fly as well. But yeah.
Great, thank you. And then we have one from Will for you, Liv, if that's okay. So Will's asked, are there any books, resources on lighting styles and techniques that you recommend?
There are, but I've probably not read them. But there's so many books and stuff, and I don't know, at uni and stuff, it's all you hear 3-point lighting and all these very simple things. I don't know. I don't stick to it. 3-point lighting. I don't believe in it. I do believe in it. It's complicated. It's all different. Everyone lights differently. Um, uh, and it's just day by day you learn more things. I think the best way to learn about it is getting a lamp in your room, in a dark room, and putting it somewhere and take a photo on a self timer and see what it does. Um, that there will be books online definitely that will help, but I just think doing it is the way it helps. You know, even being a run on set and seeing, just looking at where the lights are and what they're doing, you'll begin to understand it. And like I said, just being in your room and getting a black blanket and sitting next to it and taking a photo, and you see in your face it'd be darker, or going right next to a window so you can see the light's coming in this way and it's darker this way, so I haven't got as much light here, and the way it shapes your face. And so I don't believe all the books have no, they don't have the right answers as such. I think YouTube videos are good. There's a lot of DOPs on YouTube that will help. You know, cinematographer DOPs and YouTubers that will just show you how they light a commercial, which is the best way to see it. Because I think when you read a book, it's a bit overwhelming and you don't really know what it all means. And I don't think the photos are that great. So yeah.
And also, like, I believe, well, from teaching Film Academy and us having some very simple lighting and camera setup sessions, it's like you've got your fill light, overhead, key light, 3-point lighting. So I think that's just kind of, I think that they're just simple, traditional ways of how lighting can work.
Yeah, they're not wrong.
Yeah, but it
Yeah,
doesn't mean that you have to do it, and
yeah.
you don't have to stick to it for every shoot, every scene, every type of production that's going to be made.
Yeah, exactly. It's not wrong at all, and it can be used, and it can be great. It's just don't stick to that as every single shot you do. It has to have 3-point lighting.
Mm. So for both of you, so this is from Cassie. On bigger productions, is it recognizable to have a first aid certificate, or do they hire specific first aiders?
So you will have a first aider, like a paramedic, as standard. It's still really useful to have that first aid knowledge. But yeah, you will always have someone on set who has to be there the whole duration of the day in case anything happens. And kind of going back to what we were saying about like the call sheets earlier, on there you will have the nearest hospital and things like that and how far away that is. So yeah, like medical care is like really important, and I think kind of I think they can't shoot without a medic on set, I seem to think, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's fine. Why not get your first aid thing? I think it's always important. Um, But one thing I do recommend to get, which is slightly different, is getting a driving license if you can. I think everyone in the industry says that you have to have a driving license to get to locations and stuff. And if you can't, that's okay. But if you can, I think you should definitely try and get it.
Yeah, because also you have to have a certain number. I think it's you have to have either be a certain age or have a certain amount of years on you to like drive Luton vans, like to able to actually drive those vans with all the kit in. And like you said, if like you got a cherry picker license and um yeah, it's kind of having all these additional qualifications to ensure that you're able to then do the job that you've been hired to do and actually do more. So then you're able to get more experience and then those kind of connections are able to help and sustain your career. So there's a question about low budget now. So do you both have any tips for low budget filmmakers for lightings or locations with zero money, or where would you spend the little budget you have? What's the essentials?
I'd say like if you're on like a really, really small thing like no budget, as you said, locations, to be honest, it'd probably be like a producer who's kind of doing that a lot of those sort of responsibilities. Um yeah, I guess but if you're on a really small crew, you wouldn't have quite the same needs as like a big film or TV production. But I guess it's just being aware of like the equipment you're going to need and making sure that other people can do their jobs. And even if it's just simple stuff like making sure they have somewhere to sit or having like some work lights if you're filming at night. Things like that. Yes, just to consider.
Um, Difficult and low budget because equipment's expensive. It's about prioritizing what you really want. You know, if you're in a cafe and it's light outside and that's what you want it to look like, play into that. Try and shoot next to a window. Um, and getting fabric. So like, if you're next to a window, borrow a black blanket from home and just hang it up somewhere and have it on the other side, and that will create a dynamic image. So playing into the strengths and stuff. You can borrow equipment from there's an app called Fat Llama where you can get equipment off people for the day, and it can be relatively cheap. But then just using practical lamps, practicals are the best way to do it because you can film anywhere and it's not going to look like you can turn the camera around and there's not going to be a light there because it's a practical lamp. So practical, a practical is a lamp that is right here and you're using it as a light source. So I think play into the strengths of what you can use. And there's no point getting a load of equipment and spending a load of money on it. I think it's a waste of money. I think really just focus on the filmmaking process.
And I definitely believe like utilizing the environment. So what happens a lot is I know that short films are shot in the summer. However, if you need it to be nighttime, you're gonna have to be starting later. And then you're gonna have to wait till the sun goes down. And then you're still gonna have to put set lights up and you're still gonna have to like separate public from coming in. So I believe it's definitely utilizing your environment. Like say if anyone wants to make like a film on a park, you have to contact the council, don't you, and make sure that you have that agreement and you say who's going to be there and what you're going to take with you, and make sure everyone's wearing high vis, so everyone's safe and visible. There was a question for you, Ed. Sorry, this was from Will, who put, as well as the easy up tents, do you bring folding tables and chairs for crew
Yes.
and cast?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially if sometimes you're filming on location, you maybe don't have like a lunch space for the caterers to come and like serve lunch. Sometimes lunch gets kind of what like hot boxed where things are kind of like kept warm and then sent to the set, but sometimes they will be kind of dishing out food on set. So yeah, sometimes if you're filming in a field, you'll be popping up some tables, some chairs, some bins, stuff like that, and making a little kind of like lunch area for people. And then like taking it down at the end of the day. So yeah, it's kind of like a little pop-up eating space sometimes, often on bigger jobs. They will like buy a pub for a day and you can go and sit in there, or they'll have like arenas, things like this. But yeah, on smaller scale stuff, yeah, pop-up tables, especially like if you're making little like green room spaces and stuff like that, or often if you have kids on set who have to be doing a certain amount of education per day, they might need a little area where they can, study and things like that. But yeah.
And then, so for both of you, so I've got two more questions, then we've got to wrap up. So, what does your career progression look like in your roles? So, where would you like to be, or what do you want to be doing in 10 years' time? No pressure.
Um, I think for me, I'm kind of in a weird um, sort of transitional phase at the moment where I've moved back to Nottingham because wasn't able to live in like Leeds anymore at the time. So I've kind of come back and am now like trying to save money, hopefully go back out there, whether it's I'm potentially thinking of moving to London, but we'll see, or maybe going back up north. But yeah, I'm not really sure. I kind of had a bit of a crisis of conscience kind of over summer as to whether locations is what I want to kind of do forever, which is perfectly fine as well. Like you are able to change paths. That is completely fine. Um, but yeah, I really like things like location scouting and the management. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't mind also giving things like art department a go and things like that. So it kind of it's not set in stone for me at the moment, but I know that I do want to stay within the industry, like one way or another. But yeah.
I don't really know. Everyone always asks me what I want to do. I don't know. Um, I think I think I want to go more into helping people get into film and that sort of thing and being involved with BFI. I think I love lighting. I have a real passion for it. I think at some point I'd like to do something that, not that lighting doesn't have any meaning at all, but something that, I feel like I'm helping people do stuff. I think that's what I'd like to do in the future. But I'd also just like to get more confident, gaffer more things, gaffer bigger things. Um, and yeah, I think that's what I want to do.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think fulfillment is a massive part of having a job and sometimes I'm very guilty of that. And like when the pandemic, I was like, I don't have my purpose anymore. So yeah, having fulfillment. And then lastly, this is kind of a double-handed last question. Is there a production or a filmmaker that you would like to work on or a type of, yeah, like a type of production? And then, oh, sorry, and then within like the last, I don't know, 2 years of film and TV, is there something that you thought, oh my God, I would have loved to have worked on that?
I think for me, like something like a Christopher Nolan film would be like insane because yeah, just big scale stuff. You'd be dealing, going to like the desert or something. Something like a lot of the Star Wars things that get made use some really cool locations. I think using like so for example, I had a period of time where kept getting work in Hull of all places because things kept getting shot there for World War II because it's got quite a like historical kind of old towny bit. So that was getting used in quite a lot of kind of World War II set kind of things. So I think for me that like the creative use of locations is really cool, really interesting. When I worked on a Disney thing in Sheffield, a place called Park Hill Flats, which is like quite a famous building, since working there and then watching other shows and like some music videos and stuff, you start recognizing like, oh, I know that place, and like then and, I've been there and I've worked there, so that's really cool. But I guess, yeah, anything like just big scale would be really cool. Going to an environment I've never been to before would be really nice, and having the sort of in like unique problems and to solve and things like that would be really cool. But yeah.
I think I'd like to work on something like Nomadland, maybe, or something that sort of it's a mix of sort of documentary because I think in that film they use people that were really nomads out in America, and I don't, I think they shot it very naturalistic, so not much lighting, um, which is. But I'd like to be a part of a documentary team that goes around and it'd be very minimal lighting and filmmaking. But I think that would be so. I think that'd be really fun going to different location, lighting different things. and traveling. I'd love to travel.
Excellent, thank you. And is there anything that you want to promote or kind of say as your final comments before I do the outro?
Um, my only kind of final comments would just be resilient and have faith in your abilities. Whatever it is like you choose to do within the industry, like you will make it if you just keep at it. One thing I meant to mention is if you've got family, let's say in Yorkshire or in London, whatever, there are film offices such as Film Hub Midlands, where you can sign up for and become a part of their crew database. So you can see like jobs coming through, and they might be asking for, a location assistant in West Yorkshire, things like this. Really useful. So yeah, if you've got family and friends around the country, like utilize that. And if you need to travel for the work, stay with them. Just makes life so much easier. You don't want to be driving up to like Scotland at 2 in the morning to go to work. Like, yeah, if you've got family and friends, definitely utilize them. But yeah.
I'd just say just get involved. Get involved with stuff. Go to film festivals. They're fun. Don't worry about networking. Obviously networking is great, but don't think that if you're not chatting to amazing filmmaker at a film festival that it's gonna, it's the be all and end all. Get involved with stuff and like enjoy it. And enjoy being a part of it. Like I said, I think if you're resilient enough, you will make it in some sort of way. And if you don't make it, because sometimes I won't get jobs for a while, and I think, like I'm not really working in the industry, and then next minute you get a load of work. But don't compare yourself to people either. People put up loads of Instagram posts of doing stuff, and you think, oh, I'm not doing that, but really maybe they're not doing that much either. So don't compare yourself, and just be resilient, work hard, be nice, be humble, respect people, but also have confidence.